In this segment, I want to discuss the word syncretism. I have used that from time to time in class, but haven't taken the time to address syncretism directly. The dictionary definition of syncretism is simply an attempt to combine or reconcile differing religious or philosophical beliefs, sometimes even apparently contradictory beliefs. Now, this is a very staid, very boring, I suppose, definition, but it underlies something very important and I think very exciting about the Chinese system. What does it mean? As a practical matter, it works like this. If you're in the United States or in other Western countries, you wouldn't find it at all typical to ask someone a question, what's your religious beliefs, and have somebody say, well, I'm sort of a Roman Catholic Southern Baptist, or I'm a Lutheran Seventh-day Adventist, or I'm a Church of Christ Jehovah's Witness, or a Presbyterian something else. You know, we just don't talk about it that way. But in China, for someone to say that they are Confucian or Taoist or Buddhist or animistic, no problem at all. You can combine all of those into one package. And you can combine them into a package that gives greater emphasis to Confucianism, or greater emphasis to Taoism, or greater emphasis to Buddhism, or greater emphasis to animism. You can put them all together and have a mixture. How can that work? Well, part of it has to do with the difference between monotheism and polytheism. If you have a monotheistic religion, like Christianity, or like Judaism, or like Islam, the fact that you have one God, who's often a personal God, it becomes very difficult to do anything other than what you believe that one God is telling you to do. And so, if that God tells you to be a Roman Catholic or to behave like a Roman Catholic, it's not going to be easy for you to be a Roman Catholic and a Southern Baptist. And the same thing works around. Monotheism tends to create differing groups within the overall religious cover. True in Islam. The difference between Shia and Sunni, and the differences within Sunni religion between a whole host of beliefs is well known. You could be a Sufi, you could be a mystical dancer, or you can be a Wahhabi. You can be all kinds of different beliefs, and it's not easy to reconcile them. And I think the same can be true of Judaism. There are Reform Jews, there are conservative Jews, there are Hasidic Jews. There's a whole variety of separate groups under the overall aegis of a single religion. But not in China. Why not? Well, if you have a core of your cultural tradition that's based on Confucianism, you have something that is based on the thinking of someone who said he doesn't know if there's a God. He doesn't know if there is an afterlife. He doesn't know if any of your ancestors have any knowledge of the rituals you're going through. He does call for rituals. He does call for ancestor worship. I think the word ancestor worship is a little strong, but he does talk about rituals in which respect for the ancestors are shown. Why does he do that? Well, he does that because he believes that if you are in the proper frame of mind toward your ancestors, you'll be in the proper frame of mind toward your elders. If you're in the proper frame of mind toward your elders, you'll be in the proper frame of mind for all of the hierarchical people you'll find in your life. So you'll be in proper respectful attitude toward the emperor, if you're a subject. You'll be in proper respect toward your husband, if you're married and a woman. If you're a younger brother, you'll show the proper respect for the older brother. And if you're the son, you'll show the proper respect for the father. If you're a neighbor, you'll show proper respect for the older neighbor. All of the hierarchical system of Confucius turns on the need for these rituals. But the rituals are not commanded by God. The rituals are not proof of any kind of a belief in the afterlife. That's the Confucian core. With that kind of Confucian core, you can add other ideas to it. Now, those other ideas may not be particularly comforting to Confucian. They may seem to go in the opposite direction of Confucian, but because he's not demanding that there be a particular religious belief in a God, in an afterlife, any of the theological arguments that are typical in the West, you can make them compatible. Confucianism calls for following the Tao, but the Tao in Confucianism means proper, harmonious relationships with others. The way is to behave well toward your fellow man. Among Taoists, there's harmony. You want to have harmony, but here the harmony is with nature. And one can argue that that harmony with nature will lead to basically harmonious relationships among people. But the emphasis will be on harmony with nature rather than harmony with other human beings. Contradictory? Perhaps. Blendable? You bet. Certainly under the syncretic attitudes of the Chinese. Well, what about animism? Animism is apparently an extremely primitive, extremely long-lasting religious tradition that finds gods or spirits or ghosts or maybe even demons in the river, in the tree, in the mountain, in the barnyard, in the kitchen. There are all these gods, all these spirits. God may be too strong a word for it. They're clearly polytheistic spirits that need to be appeased. Can you be a Confucian and be an animist? Well, of course. If you follow the Confucian rituals, you've done all you need to do to be a Confucian. If you want then to believe that there's a God in the tree stump, go ahead, no problem. If you want to burn incense to the kitchen god, go ahead, no problem. That's not going to get in the way of anyone else. As long as you also perform the Confucian rites toward your ancestors, you're going to maintain the proper balance that Confucius asked for in interpersonal relations. And anything else you believe is just fine. In addition, when you add a latter-day religious tradition, and by latter-day I mean Confucianism starts about 500 BCE, Taoism starts about 500 BCE, animism is there for a long, long time before that, undated because it is itself such an amorphous tradition. Buddhism doesn't come to China for another 800 years. It's 300-400 AD before Buddhism is found in any particular strength in China. Why can Buddhism be assembled? Well, Buddhism has a whole lot of spiritual beings. It has the Buddha, but it has all kinds of Bodhisattvas and other figures that are heroic, perhaps saintly, and these blend quite easily into animism. So, Confucianism, Taoism, animism, Buddhism, they can all blend together. And one finds people performing rites in Taoist temples, and then also performing rites in Confucian temples, and then also performing rites in Buddhist temples, and of course burning incense to all kinds of gods that are all around the house, and in the barnyard, and in the vicinity in which you live. This is syncretism. There's one more aspect that makes it logical. In China, as I've said, the great fear is of Luan, of social disorder. If you have different religious beliefs, and if those religious beliefs are exclusionaries, if you say, well, I'm a Roman Catholic, so I can't be a Southern Baptist, or I'm a Southern Baptist, so I can't be a Lutheran, you're excluding people. But the Chinese would find that that exclusion was itself disorderly. So if your focus is on harmony, then your focus must be on some way to combine or resolve or reconcile different religious beliefs. Now it's kind of curious. This would seem to make the Chinese very tolerant. And I don't know how you can find anything more tolerant than someone who can believe in Confucianism and Taoism and animism and Buddhism all at the same time. How tolerant is that? Very tolerant indeed. So, curiously, the Chinese are very tolerant. It's almost as if they had what we find in the U.S. Constitution, a protection in the opening sentence of the Bill of Rights that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. But of course no such constitution exists, and no such words would appear in any Chinese document, because they would speak to individual rights, and the Chinese focus is all on the common good. Curiously, then, a call for the common good, and a call for conformity with the common good, and a call for never asserting your right to free speech or your right to religion, can end up with a very tolerant system. And I would argue that it does in China. Now, what about more modern steps? What about Islam? What about Christianity? Here a problem occurs because while Buddhism, animism, Taoism, and Confucianism can be blended because they're polytheistic, the problem is created by monotheistic religions. So monotheistic religions have had trouble in China.